And finally, very pragmatically, and it's a reflection of my own past, is to make sure that any linkages that are developed with NGOs or civil society organizations really are based in those fundamental values of partnership that we've studied about and learned about, and recognize in particular the costs to the NGOs of engaging with universities, because there are costs and they're real. And so I'll just flag that now today. As I start to wrap up, let me make another observation, that in my experience in working with a variety of civil society organizations, both as staff and as volunteer, it is a little bit ironic that those most interested in pursuing a social change agenda are least able to change themselves. And so I encourage you to think about new structures, new processes, new ways of doing things that aren't constricted by the way it's always been done. I mention this because in the work I did with WUSC and other places, we engaged in some innovative new partnerships. We changed job descriptions, we changed roles, and it was profoundly uncomfortable for folks. But the underlying purpose was to improve our impact in the work that we did. And I think we were able to set a number of organizations on a new path by acknowledging the need for change ourselves. I'm fortunate in my job to travel across the country. I think I've visited now about 75 campuses across Canada. I've had a few international trips recently to see some global change underway. And Alistair pointed to the very broad trends underway globally. But I think one of the biggest, there are two big challenges facing Canada right now. They're complacency and constraint. We're actually too prosperous in this country. We've not had to actually harness our resources as effectively as we could. And so while we take great pride that there are 1 million undergraduate students in Canada today, university enrollment in China has increased by 1 million people in the last 12 months. We take great pride in the number of universities we've built across this country. In fact, I think Ontario's Deputy Minister of Higher Education says you're now 90% of the population is within 80 kilometers of a post-secondary institution. That's a great accomplishment. That's a profound accomplishment. India is setting out to build 1,300 new universities in the next decade. Brazil, we think of Brazil as a vacation place. We think of Brazil as where we have trade disputes. Brazil is actually producing twice as many PhDs as Canada is right now. And they're investing twice as much in research and development as Canada is. Those are just three countries that I'm familiar with and that are moving at a pace that is truly global, that is truly connected. And Canadians, I'm preaching to the converted here, but Canadians need to be aware of how quickly the world is shifting. Now let me talk to the issue of constraint. I can't tell you how good it is to be away from Ottawa right now. For the last year, the only talk in town has been about the strategic and operating review, about how we're going to find 10% out of our operating budgets in the government to get our fiscal house in order and get matters under control. Worse than the cutting exercise, because governments do need to manage their expenditures, is that it has limited our aspirations as a country. It's limited our aspirations in a time when actually Canada has a great deal to offer the world. And so I've said this in other speeches before, and I'll say it again, that as you set out to think about this new institute, this new school, this new program, this new initiative, how it lands, let's be bold in our ambition. If all we do is set out to achieve what we're going to set out to achieve, we're setting our sights too low. We have to do something spectacular here. Now, some of you have heard me speak about watching apartheid crumble. Some of you have heard me speak about the refugees in Dadaab, and I won't recast what Alistair did so movingly a few moments ago. But I want to close with an image of another project that WUSC was engaged with in Sri Lanka. About 18 months after the Asian tsunami, I had the opportunity to visit the community of Ampara. Ampara is on the northeast coast of Sri Lanka. It is actually where Canada's disaster emergency relief team, the DART, flew in with their heavy lift airlift capacity Government of Canada through Department of National Defence spent $25 million in 6 weeks. Now, Canada was criticized for being slow to respond, and we were. We didn't have the mechanism in place. And our members of the armed forces did an admirable job in providing first aid. But frankly, by the time they got there, they were providing bottled water to people who had already found water, and they were providing bandages to people who were already getting first aid. But I was visiting about 18 months after that impressive display of Canadian resources in Ampara, and I could see the very same shot was in the newspaper of the beach, and there at the corner of the beach was what I would call a skills training shack. It wasn't a skills training center, it was a shack. It was a corrugated tin roof, simple construction with concrete blocks. And in that shack were 25 young people learning to be plumbers, learning to be carpenters, and learning other skilled trades. Over the course of 25 years, WUSC has provided skills training to over 25,000 people in Sri Lanka. Interestingly, the cost was about $25 million. The same amount of money that was spent in 6 weeks providing first aid and good feelings to Canadians. And so, I mean, and we've done the measurements, we've done the statistics. Average income has quadrupled as a result of that training. And most spectacularly in that area, which was a cauldron for Tamil and Sinhalese conflict, a cauldron of conflict between Buddhists, Muslim, and Hindus, we provided an economic alternative for child soldiers. Now, as I say, I love traveling the world, I love learning about these things, and occasionally you ask the completely dumbass Canadian question. So I'm there talking to young people, how are you doing? Oh, tell me how you found out about this program. Like, did they find a poster, or did they see? These folks were child soldiers that had been spirited out of a life of misery and violence to come and work and learn a new trade that would open whole new doors of possibility for them. And so I close by saying that whether you're a global superpower like China, India, and Brazil, or whether you're a refugee in Dadaab, or whether you're a former child soldier, the strategy is actually the same. The strategy is to invest in education, because no one can take that education away from you. I want to really encourage us today to think broadly and boldly, and to leave one more, there are two quotes I was playing with today. One is the Bruce Cockburn line, "Kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight." And the other is from Václav Havel. I was so sad to see that Václav Havel passed away. He was a transformative leader, that's an understatement. He was a poet, he was a playwright, he was the architect of the Velvet Revolution. He was thrust into the presidency of Czechoslovakia in a period of about 6 weeks. Now that's, you're an overnight success. He'd been working for 40 years on it, but as the Velvet Revolution got underway, he was thrust into the presidency in about 6 weeks. I encourage you all to look at a speech called A New Year's Address, 1990, by Václav Havel. It is a powerful testimony to the role of civil society and to the need for government and leaders to be candid with their societies. And in that speech, he says, don't let us be fooled that politics is the art of the possible. Politics is the art of the impossible. So go for it, 12.